In February 2022, I received the following email. It isn't unusual for me to receive emails from people who claim to be associated with the family, but this one was different. He told me he had lived at Spawn Ranch in late 1968 and early 1969, not with the family, but in the back ranch house, part of a separate group of hippies living on the property at the time. People who existed alongside the family, close enough to see them, close enough to understand the atmosphere there, but not inside the inner circle. This is the man that many of you know as Mr. X. And then he told me something else. He said that during this period, he had been Charles Manson's primary LSD supplier. That kind of statement immediately raises alarms and eyebrows, as it should. Anyone doing this kind of work who doesn't feel cautious in that moment probably shouldn't be doing this work at all. So we talked, not once and not briefly. We spoke for weeks. What struck me wasn't bravado or someone trying to insert himself into history. It was fear and guilt. A man who had spent decades wondering whether something he had done, something that seemed small at the time, might have played some role in something terrible later. He also told me about the day that several of the family women came to the back ranch house to warn him that Charlie didn't want him dealing to customers on the property, something he insisted he had never done. A week later, the house was raided. Police confiscated a mason jar they believed contained marijuana. When the case went to court, the judge opened the jar, smelled it, and realized it was green tea. The case was dismissed. But Mr. X never returned to Spawn Ranch. He believed, though he could never prove, that Manson had tipped off the police. What haunted him wasn't anger, but confusion. He thought they were on good terms. He never understood why he was chased away. After that period, his life unraveled for a time. In the videos, you will hear him talk about how LSD changed with the arrest of Owsley. Owsley gave away acid in Golden Gate Park, wanting everyone to experience mind-enhancing enlightenment. But the dealers who came in after he went away were in it for profit. That meant cutting the drugs with strychnine and other poisons. So Mr. X stopped using acid. Instead, he fell into drug addiction with heavier substances. That was followed by arrests, 2 prison terms in the 1970s, and eventually, slowly rebuilding a life that he became proud of, a business, a marriage, stability. But the past never entirely left him. The real reason he contacted me was something he had never said publicly. He worried that the murders might have been committed under the influence of LSD he had supplied. That possibility stayed with him for decades. Imagine carrying that alone. Eventually, I traveled to California with a colleague to meet him. We spent over 3 hours talking, not just about Manson and Spawn Ranch, but about the era, about youth, about how easily lines blurred in that moment between freedom and danger. He was candid, thoughtful, often emotional, and very clear about one thing. He didn't want fame or recognition. He just wanted the truth of what he had experienced to exist somewhere outside of his own memory. But he did share with us his driver's license and some of his criminal record. He wanted us to help him research the time frame of his arrest at Spawn Ranch, a date he no longer remembered, to understand whether it had occurred right before the murders or well ahead of them. My colleague and I were able to verify what he shared with us, and although the date of the raid of the back ranch house was not found, it appeared to have occurred at least 2 to 3 months before the Tate and LaBianca murders. Information that we passed on to Mr. X, who was relieved. That meant there was no way they still had his product on those dark and bloody nights of summer 1969. Later, he and I recorded the interview that many of you saw, his face obscured and his name withheld, because that was the agreement that allowed him to speak at all. What he gave us was rare, not a sensational story, not a solution to the case. The case has long been solved. What he gave us was proximity, context, a glimpse into the environment around Spawn Ranch from someone who stood just outside the family itself. And that matters. History isn't made only by the central figures. It's shaped by the people around them. The witnesses, the neighbors, people who saw things that didn't seem relevant at the time. But after those videos with Mr. X were released, something else happened. Suspicion took over. People questioned whether he really existed, whether the interview was legitimate, whether the story itself had been fabricated. And I understand skepticism. Healthy skepticism is necessary in this field. It keeps stories honest. But skepticism can also become suspicion for its own sake, a need to tear something or someone down rather than understand. And in the process, something really unfortunate happened. Instead of listening to what this man was trying to share, the conversation in some circles shifted toward accusation and infighting. And that was a missed opportunity. Because Mr. X wasn't asking to be believed blindly. He was offering his experience, one piece of a much larger puzzle, a human story from the edges of something infamous. I knew he was legitimate. I did my due diligence. Documentation was shown, information was verified privately. But this story was never about proving me or anyone else right. It was about preserving something before it disappeared. This month I learned that the man that you know as Mr. X passed away in December of 2024. He's gone. Whatever else he might have remembered, whatever details he never thought to mention, whatever reflections might have come with more time, including the more accurate map that he wanted to draw of Spawn Ranch, they're gone too. That's the part that makes me the most sad, because the goal of this work has never been to sensationalize or to solve a mystery that's already solved. It is to understand how these things happen, how ordinary people get pulled into extraordinary and dangerous situations, and what we can learn from them today. Mr. X understood that. That is why he spoke. He wasn't trying to rewrite history. He was trying to make peace with it. Most people who reach out after watching these videos aren't looking for attention. They've spent decades not talking. They carry memories that don't fit neatly into headlines or documentaries. Sometimes they're proud of parts of their past. Sometimes they're ashamed of it. Usually it's a bit of both. And when someone trusts you enough to tell those stories, you have a responsibility to treat them carefully, not as proof, not as spectacle, but as people trying to make sense of their own history. I'm only interested in the truth, not a better story and not a more dramatic version, not something designed to shock or entertain. There would be no point in doing this work otherwise. These stories are often incomplete, sometimes uncomfortably fragmented, and rarely provable. That doesn't make them meaningless. Not every memory arrives with paperwork attached to it. People remember bits and pieces, especially after half a century, how things felt, how they understood what was happening around them. And sometimes the truth inside those memories is worth hearing even when it remains unresolved. We can't change what happened in 1969. The case itself, again, was solved a long time ago. But understanding is different from solving. Understanding is what allows us to recognize how influence works, how belonging can be weaponized, how people slowly lose themselves while believing they finally found meaning. And when we listen carefully to the people who were there, even on the edges of the story, those memories become more than history. They become lessons. So I want to end this with something simple. Will you listen with compassion, not uncritically, but humanly? Remember that the people who come forward late in life are often trying to make peace and sense of something that they carried alone for a really long time. And if you are someone who still carries a story from that time, or from any time, and you've never shared it because you were afraid of being judged or misunderstood, know that your stories do still matter. Not because they change what happened, but because they help us understand it. And understanding is how we make sure fewer young and vulnerable people ever find themselves walking toward the same kind of tragedy again. Rest in peace, Joe. And I believe you did find peace.